Hi, intermediate class. It's Miss Sophia. Happy Friday, and welcome to our next video activity that I have set up. So the activity is listening to this psychologist and listening throughout his TED Talk. I'm going to do some pauses, and you'll see why in a little bit. But all I ask is that you find a comfy spot to sit, maybe have some people that either your siblings or your parents sit with you, and have a notepad or your laptop, because there's going to be, I think, 4 or 5 words that will have you write down for a discussion you can do after watching this video, and then I'll touch upon that at the end of this. So again, just relax, put on your headphones or turn up this speaker, and just kind of enjoy and listen and absorb this information. This is kind of touching upon what this whole week was about, which is, mind health, body health, and just kind of getting them connected together. So me and Miss Emily really liked this way that this psychologist talked about health. And I think it's going to be really good. And hopefully, too, if you want to watch this before or quickly, or we'll briefly talk about it even on our Padlet platform. So again, I'll touch upon those details at the end, but for now, just settle in, relax. And I'm going to do a couple pauses throughout it, just so that you have time to do a quick write down. Okay.
When I became a psychologist, I began to notice favoritism of a different kind, and that is how much more we value the body than we do the mind. I spent 9 years at university earning my doctorate in psychology, and I can't tell you how many people look at my business card and say, "Oh, a psychologist, so not a real doctor." As if it should say that on my card. This favoritism we show the body over the mind, I see it everywhere. I recently was at a friend's house, and their 5-year-old was getting ready for bed. He was standing on a stool by the sink brushing his teeth when he slipped and scratched his leg on the stool when he fell. He cried for a minute, but then he got back up, got back on the stool, and reached out for a box of Band-Aids to put one on his cut. Now, this kid could barely tie his shoelaces, but he knew you have to cover a cut so it doesn't become infected, and you have to care for your teeth by brushing twice a day. We all know how to maintain our physical health and how to practice dental hygiene, right? We know it since we were 5 years old. But what do we know about maintaining our psychological health? Well, nothing. What do we teach our children about emotional hygiene? Nothing. How is it we spend more time taking care of our teeth than we do our minds? Why is it our physical health is so much more important to us than our psychological health? We sustain psychological injuries even more often than we do physical ones, injuries like failure or rejection or loneliness. And they can also get worse if we ignore them, and they can impact our lives in dramatic ways. And yet, even though there are scientifically proven techniques we could use to treat these kinds of psychological injuries, we don't. It doesn't even occur to us that we should. "Oh, you're feeling depressed. Just shake it off. It's all in your head." Can you imagine saying that to somebody with a broken leg? "Oh, just walk it off. It's all in your leg." It is time we close the gap between our physical and our psychological health. It's time we made them more equal, more like twins. Speaking of which, my brother is also a psychologist, so he's not a real doctor either. We didn't study together, though. In fact, the hardest thing I've ever done in my life is move across the Atlantic to New York City to get my doctorate in psychology. We were apart then for the first time in our lives, and the separation was brutal for both of us. But while he remained among family and friends, I was alone in a new country. We missed each other terribly, but international phone calls were really expensive then, and we could only afford to speak for 5 minutes a week. When our birthday rolled around, it was the first we wouldn't be spending together. We decided to splurge, and that week we would talk for 10 minutes. I spent the morning pacing around my room, waiting for him to call, and waiting, and waiting. But the phone didn't ring. Given the time difference, I assumed, okay, he's out with friends, he'll call later. There were no cell phones then. But he didn't. And I began to realize that after being away for over 10 months, he no longer missed me the way I missed him. Now, I knew he would call in the morning, but that night was one of the saddest and longest nights of my life. I woke up the next morning. I glanced down at the phone, and I realized I had kicked it off the hook when pacing the day before. I stumbled out of bed, I put the phone back on the receiver, and it rang a second later, and it was my brother. And boy, was he pissed. It was the saddest and longest night of his life as well. Now, I tried to explain what happened, but he said, I don't understand. If you saw I wasn't calling you, why didn't you just pick up the phone and call me? He was right. Why didn't I call him? I didn't have an answer then, but I do today, and it's a simple one.
Okay, class. So this is the first one you can see here, and it's loneliness. You'll see a few of these. Dr. Guy Rich does this where he'll place the word he's talking about up on the screen in the presentation. So here we're gonna pause, and like I said, I think there's about 4 or 5. Write it down, or get your parent, guardian, sibling, whoever might be near you to write it down for you, and or type it or voice record it into your laptop, because these are going to be talking points that after you've watched this and listened to him talk, you kind of can bring your own personal feelings, thoughts, ideas, and understanding of each of these that he's going to kind of bring up and talk about. So like I said, I'll just pause at each one so you have a few minutes and you can write it down. And then of course, if you think of things right away, go ahead and write them with it, but no pressure. You can wait till the end. Okay, let's keep going.
Loneliness. Loneliness creates a deep psychological wound, one that distorts our perceptions and scrambles our thinking. It makes us believe that those around us care much less than they actually do. It makes us really afraid to reach out, because why set yourself up for rejection and heartache when your heart is already aching more than you can stand? I was in the grips of real loneliness back then, but I was surrounded by people all day, so it never occurred to me. But loneliness is defined purely subjectively. It depends solely on whether you feel emotionally or socially disconnected from those around you, and I did. There is a lot of research on loneliness, and all of it is horrifying. Loneliness won't just make you miserable, it will kill you. I'm not kidding. Chronic loneliness increases your likelihood of an early death by 14%. 14%. Loneliness causes high blood pressure, high cholesterol. It even suppresses the functioning of your immune system, making you vulnerable to all kinds of illnesses and diseases. In fact, scientists have concluded that taken together, chronic loneliness poses as significant a risk for your long-term health and longevity as cigarette smoking. Now, cigarette packs come with warnings saying this could kill you, but loneliness doesn't. And that's why it's so important we prioritize our psychological health, that we practice emotional hygiene. Because you can't treat a psychological wound if you don't even know you're injured.
Okay, so here is the next one. Pay attention to emotional pain.